Look at the cable in your bag right now. Small oval connector on both ends. Works either way you plug it in. Charges your phone, your laptop, your headphones, your camera. One cable, every device. No fumbling in the dark to figure out which side is up. It feels almost obvious. Like this is just how things were always heading. But here's the part almost nobody thinks about. That cable did not arrive because the market figured it out. It arrived because a legislature voted 602 to 13 to make it happen. And the story of why that vote was necessary is far stranger and far more revealing than most people realize. Because the technology was ready, the engineering was done, the better connector existed. And one of the most powerful companies on the planet spent over a decade making sure you couldn't have it, because the old one was too profitable to give up. Start with what most people assume when they hear EU forces USB-C on everyone. The instinct is to picture bureaucrats who don't understand technology making arbitrary decisions about hardware. And Apple, to their credit, leaned hard into that framing. Their official statement to Reuters said they were concerned that strict regulation mandating just one type of connector stifles innovation rather than encouraging it. That sounds reasonable. It sounds like a company protecting its users from clumsy government interference, until you look at what Lightning actually was. Lightning launched in 2012 with the iPhone 5, and it was genuinely impressive at the time. It replaced the old 30-pin dock connector. It was reversible. You could plug it in either way, and it was compact and durable. Apple wasn't wrong that it was a good design, but inside every single Lightning connector, there was something a standard USB-C cable has never had and never will have: a proprietary authentication chip. That chip was the reason every third-party cable, every dock, every car mount, every accessory of any kind that wanted to work with an iPhone had to pay Apple a licensing fee of $4 per connector through something called the MFI program, made for iPhone. The innovation Apple was protecting wasn't a superior technology, it was a toll booth, a physical gatekeeper built into every cable, ensuring that the accessory ecosystem surrounding the most popular phone on Earth sent a cut back to Cupertino every single time. USB-C has no such chip. It's an open standard, developed collaboratively by the USB Implementers Forum and released in 2014. Any manufacturer can implement it for free. No authentication, no licensing, no gatekeeper, which meant switching from Lightning to USB-C wasn't just a hardware decision for Apple. It was a decision to dismantle a revenue structure embedded in the pockets of over 1 billion people. That explains Apple's resistance, but it still doesn't explain why the European Union had to write a law. Why couldn't the market just choose the better connector on its own? Here's the part that gets genuinely overlooked. The EU didn't wake up one day in 2022 and decide to regulate chargers. They had been trying to fix this exact problem since 2009. 13 years before the law passed, the European Commission sat down with 14 of the world's largest mobile phone manufacturers, including Apple, and got them to sign a voluntary agreement to develop a common charging standard. 14 companies signing a memorandum of understanding, committing to interoperability. It was supposed to solve the problem without legislation. What actually happened was that Android manufacturers converged on micro USB, a reasonable if imperfect connector that became the near-universal standard for everything that wasn't an iPhone. And Apple signed the agreement, then introduced the 30-pin to micro USB adapter. Technically a workaround that let Lightning devices connect to a micro USB cable through a dongle, and kept Lightning as the actual port. Voluntary compliance, done just enough to avoid immediate pressure, but not enough to change anything. The EU watched this for 13 years. Then they wrote the law. It passed the European Parliament in October 2022 with 602 votes in favor and 13 against. Near unanimous. And the numbers behind why are stark. In 2020 alone, EU consumers bought approximately 420 million electronic devices. The average person owned 3 chargers. Nearly 40% of EU consumers reported having problems charging their device because no compatible charger was available despite owning multiple ones. Discarded and unused chargers were generating 11,000 tons of electronic waste every single year, and more than 30 different charger types existed in the market simultaneously. The EU estimated that standardizing on USB-C would save consumers roughly 250 million euros per year, just in unnecessary charger purchases. This wasn't a theoretical inconvenience. It was a measurable, documented failure of the market to solve a problem it had every incentive to create and almost none to fix. Now, why USB-C specifically? Because USB-C isn't just the current connector, it's a fundamentally different class of engineering object than anything that came before it. That oval shape, fully symmetrical on both ends, is the most visible feature, but it's almost the least interesting one. What matters is what the port can negotiate. USB-C uses a protocol called USB power delivery, which allows the connector to dynamically agree with whatever device it's plugged into about how much power it actually needs. The same port, the same cable. 5 watts for a pair of earbuds, 27 watts for a phone, 65 watts for a laptop, up to 240 watts for a high-performance machine. The port asks, the device answers, and the correct amount of power flows. Nothing before USB-C could do that across such a range in a single standardized connection. And then there's the data side. Under USB 4, a USB-C cable can move data at 40 gigabits per second. Lightning, frozen at its 2012 specifications, topped out at 480 megabits per second, USB 2.0 speeds in a phone that was shooting ProRes video by 2021. The iPhone 15 Pro's USB-C port is roughly 80 times faster for data transfer than the Lightning port it replaced. That same USB-C cable can simultaneously power a device, transfer data, and carry enough signal to drive a 4K monitor on an external display. Lightning could do none of those last two things in any meaningful way. One small oval connector, power, data, and video, built on an open standard anyone can use for free. The technical case for USB-C wasn't close. The reason it took a law wasn't that the technology was uncertain. It was that changing it was too expensive for one company that controlled too much of the market. But here's the twist that most people completely missed when the law passed. The EU mandate was legally binding on 27 member states. That's it. The law applied in Europe. Apple technically could have built one version of the iPhone for the EU with USB-C and kept Lightning everywhere else. They could have maintained 2 product lines. They didn't, because the cost and complexity of manufacturing and distributing 2 different hardware versions of the world's most produced consumer device was greater than the cost of simply switching globally. So Apple announced the USB-C iPhone 15 in September 2023, a full year before the EU deadline, and released it worldwide, not just in Europe, everywhere. This is a documented phenomenon. Academics and regulators call it the Brussels effect. When a market as large and wealthy as the EU passes a regulation, companies don't build 2 versions. They build one version that meets the strictest standard and sell it everywhere. GDPR worked the same way. A European data privacy law became the de facto global model because building jurisdiction-specific versions of websites and software was more expensive than complying everywhere. The EU's 400 million consumers give its regulations a gravitational pull strong enough to bend global manufacturing. Not through extraterritorial enforcement, but through the basic economics of production at scale. American consumers are using USB-C because European regulators acted first. Indian consumers are using USB-C because of a mandate that followed the EU's lead in 2025. The connector in the pocket of someone in Brazil or Japan or Australia who never heard of Directive EU 2022/2380 is there because Brussels voted 602 to 13, and the math of global manufacturing did the rest. Pick up that cable again. Same oval, same symmetrical ends. Works either way. The shape hasn't changed. But now you can see it clearly. The reason this works both ways is because an open standard made it possible. The reason it's in your pocket is because a law made it inevitable. And the reason it's in pockets everywhere on Earth, not just in Europe, is because one market was large enough to change everything. Whether the rest of the world voted on it or not, the EU is already looking at the next problem: wireless charging. Because wherever there's a proprietary standard, there's a toll booth. And wherever there's a toll booth, this fight isn't really over yet.